Thank you, Ascan Corla. Can I first of all thank all the deputies who've contributed to debate this evening with compassion and empathy. And can I add, that is shared by deputies on all sides of this House. All of us are appalled and horrified by what is happening in Gaza. I addressed it all fully aware of the deep sensitivity surrounding the plight of the Palestinian people. And I strongly and utterly condemn the continuing Israeli military operations in Gaza, and I use the word genocide, because this has brought untold suffering on the people of Gaza. And Israel's plans to expand its military operation in Gaza and establish its prolonged presence are beyond alarming and will further compound an already catastrophic situation. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza remains a matter to the forefront of our minds. I hold a deep respect for the principles at the heart of this bill, our collective commitment to human rights and international law. This is a value I believe we all share in this House. The only issue that remains is this: how can we best act to make a real difference? As I said, we are all appalled by what is happening. My only question is, how can we as government act in a way that is effective? I believe the bill is well-intentioned, but we must carefully and with consideration assess the effectiveness of the bill, what it will achieve. And Minister O'Donoghue has done this. The advice received by government says the bill won't achieve what it intends to do. And when it can't achieve its objectives, that serves nobody in the end. I would like to reiterate that the objectives of the bill before us, as outlined by Deputy Doherty, is to end the sale of Israeli bonds across the EU. Israeli bonds are not for sale on our stock exchange or through any company we in Ireland regulate. The bill wouldn't impose any restrictions on the ability of the central bank to approve a prospectus from Israel. And that is the crux of the matter, because it is crucial to remember that the prospectus regulation is EU law, and Ireland cannot unilaterally amend or undermine that law. As Deputy Nash explained, approval of the prospectus only requires that it complies with EU law, and there is no question of the central bank facilitating in any way the sale of bonds. Look, as deputies are aware, Ireland is a committed proponent of multilateral action. We do not have a domestic sanctions regime. We implement EU and UN sanctions. When we address complex international issues, it is essential that any measures introduced have to be negotiated, agreed and introduced at EU or UN level. The collective power of the EU is best placed to promote the objectives of the bloc's common foreign and security policy and to bring about a change in the policy or behaviour of the subject of the measures. Any attempt to act unilaterally on matters as sensitive and complex as financial restrictions could undermine the coalition we are trying to see form at EU level. And to me, this is really important. Ireland has been painstakingly involved in helping to build this coalition. And in this context, I think we have to prioritise coordinated action through the EU and UN. The bill does not focus on the actions of Israel as a state. Instead, it seeks to criminalise those who sell and purchase the securities themselves, as well as entities that facilitate the sale and purchase of the bonds. This raises a number of issues. First, there's the question of extraterritoriality. Finally, I managed that. The bill is drafted. It aims to prohibit all sales and purchases of Israeli government securities caught by regulations, without reference as to how the transaction would need to be connected to Ireland for an offence to have occurred. While I have likened the measures proposed in the bill to domestic sanctions, it is important to note some difference. Restrictive measures, whether at EU or UN level, are designed to be temporary and targeted in nature, and critically respect the fundamental rights of individuals and entities. It is clear that this approach has not been taken in the bill before us. Section 3 of the proposed legislation requires the Minister to make a determination on how monies raised by Israel from a particular security or class of securities are applied. From a regulatory point of view, the EU Prospectus Regulation does require a use of proceeds disclosure. However, it would be possible for an issuer to arrange an issuance of securities with a use of proceeds that excludes these purposes by, for example, issuing a green bond. Therefore, in terms of trying to restrict Israel's ability to raise funding to support an action in the Occupied Territories Bill, this bill completely overlooks the fungibility of such financing, and that leaves loopholes in this bill.
They're selling war bonds, they're not even paid.
Deputy, please.
That's a nonsense.
Deputy, please.
It's a real argument. As Deputy Doherty shouting at me will not.
You have your moment.
If you want to make your argument, make it on your own time.
Deputy Doherty, you'll have your time.
Look, what I've spoken about are not legal abstractions. They fundamentally undermine the effectiveness of this bill. And you and I know if legislation means anything, it must be effective. Ireland's long-standing support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestine conflict remains an integral part of our foreign policy. And personally, I am pleased to say that from my very first days in the European Parliament, that has been my own stance. The government is working to build consensus at EU and international level to support the implementation of a negotiated two-state solution and lasting peace process. And we condemn in the strongest possible terms the continuing Israeli military operations in Gaza. We support the review of the EU-Israeli Association Agreement, and we welcome what has happened in recent days. In fact, Ireland pushed for this, and I can personally say that back in November 2023, when nobody in this Parliament was speaking about it, I personally wrote to the European Commission on a number of occasions to raise this issue. And when I received no response, I worked through some of the MEPs in the Parliament. Ireland has intervened in South Africa's International Court of Justice case against Israel under the Genocide Convention. And of course, we recognise Palestine as a sovereign and independent state. It is very clear that the government is committed to speaking out on behalf of the Palestinian people. And this morning, the Taoiseach brought a memorandum to Cabinet requesting government approval for the preparation of a general scheme of a bill to prohibit imports from illegal settlements in the occupied territory. As the Taoiseach said after Cabinet, we are all equally appalled and sickened by what's happening in Gaza, and the government has decided to approve bringing forward this important piece of legislation. Can I finally say, we are not standing idly by. We are taking action, as already outlined, and we are progressing the Occupied Territories Bill. Just because we raise issues with the legislation here this evening does not mean we don't care. We do. Just because we are acting in every way we can. And we believe that this legislation, however well intentioned, will not achieve its objective. And that's what matters. People have talked about fine words. Fine words from any side of the House don't work. What works is legislation that's effective.
Thank you, Minister.